You breathe in, and as the air fills your lungs, you feel the most ordinary act of life becomes something extraordinary, a reminder that you, too, are surrounded by an invisible ocean of gases, an atmosphere that wraps you in its soft embrace. And as you sit with that awareness, your thoughts drift outward beyond Earth, beyond the familiar, to the countless planets scattered through the night sky, each one carrying or perhaps longing for its own version of breath, each one holding in atmosphere or none at all. And in that difference lies the story of habitability, of warmth, of protection, of life itself. You imagine planets as living beings, each atmosphere their exhalation, their protective skin, their voice to the universe. And you begin to see that without air, a planet is silent, barren, exposed, but with air, with even the thinnest veil of gases, a planet speaks, a planet breathes, a planet dreams of becoming more than stone. You drift close in your mind to Earth, your first guide, with the atmosphere as a cradle, holding in warmth like a blanket on a cold night, scattering sunlight into blue that fills your days, filtering dangerous radiation so that you may walk freely, sustaining the breath of animals, the whisper of leaves, the cycles of rain and cloud that turn a lifeless rock into a garden. You sense how fragile it is, this thin film compared to the size of the planet, and yet how mighty, how decisive in shaping the surface. And you realize that atmospheres are storytellers, whispering the secrets of the worlds they cover, telling of volcanism, of oceans, of plants, of chemistry unfolding silently across eons. You breathe again, and now you picture Mars, with its air so thin you cannot survive a moment unprotected, a ghost of an atmosphere, unable to hold warmth, letting precious water escape, leaving behind deserts and dust storms that roar across its plains. You contrast it with Venus, cloaked in air so heavy and hot it crushes and burns, a blanket too thick, a greenhouse runaway, turning a once Earth-like world into a furnace. And in these two extremes you see the power of atmospheric breath. Too little and a planet freezes, too much and it suffocates, but just the right balance, as on Earth, and a planet thrives. You drift further, imagining giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn, their atmospheres vast and deep, swirling with storms larger than Earth itself, colors of ochre and crimson, clouds of ammonia and methane, their solid surfaces hidden far below, if they exist at all. And you realize that atmospheres can be not only thin shells, but the very bulk of a planet, worlds that are sky from top to bottom. You rest in this thought, feeling the diversity, the poetry of it. Each planet a breath, each breath a story, each story a clue to whether a planet is alive, or still, or forever silent. You return now to the idea of atmospheres as clues, as messengers, because light passing through them changes, bends, scatters, absorbs, leaving fingerprints that reveal what gases are present. And this is how astronomers, standing at such a distance, can tell if a planet has water vapor or carbon dioxide or methane, and someday perhaps oxygen, the great signal of life. You imagine a planet crossing in front of its star, its thin veil of gases glowing as starlight filters through, and you realize the atmosphere becomes a lens, a messenger, a cosmic breath revealing what lies unseen below. You feel wonder in this, knowing that even if we cannot yet step foot on these worlds, their atmospheres come to us in the faintest lines of color, in the gentlest whispers of light. You think now of how atmospheres hold heat, acting as blankets of varying thickness. Without them, nights plunge into deadly cold, days into searing heat, but with them, climates soften, oceans stay liquid, life finds stability, and in this way air is not only breath but balance, the regulator of a planet's rhythm. You imagine walking on Titan, Saturn's largest moon, where a thick orange atmosphere, rich in nitrogen and methane, would press gently against your suit, where seas of liquid hydrocarbons lie under hazy skies, and you realize that even there, so far from the sun, air creates possibility, a world with lakes and weather, alien yet familiar. You drift further in your vision, picturing how atmospheres scatter light, turning sunsets on Earth red, making Mars twilight blue, filling exoplanet skies with hues we can only dream of, and you see how beauty itself is written in the physics of air, how the ordinary act of scattering paints world with color. You rest in this thought, feeling how atmospheres are not just shields but artists, painting skies, shaping climates, holding the music of wind and storm. You sense too how fragile atmospheres can be, how solar winds can strip them away, how magnetic fields protect them, how chemistry and gravity and distance in the star all play their parts. And you realize that the story of a planet's breath is the story of its survival, of its ability to endure across billions of years. You reflect now on your own breath, the inhale and exhale that continues without thought, sustained by Earth's air, a partnership older than memory. And you feel gratitude, knowing that without this fragile veil above you, no life would persist. You sense that to look for alien life is, in truth, to look for alien breaths, for atmospheres carrying signs of balance, of chemistry out of equilibrium, of gases that do not belong unless something is renewing them, something alive. And so you drift in thought, recognizing that exoplanet atmospheres are not only scientific puzzles, but mirrors of our own, each one reminding us of Earth, each one reminding us that air is both ordinary and miraculous. You breathe once more, slowly, deeply, as the chapter closes, and you begin to wonder gently what colors those alien breaths might take, what rainbows of gases might reveal themselves as starlight passes through them. And with this thought, you are carried softly onward into the next chapter, where the colors of air will reveal their hidden signatures. You breathe softly and drift deeper into the vision of atmospheres, and now you begin to see them not only as blankets of gases or shields of life, but also as canvases of light, each one revealing its story through color, each one painting the universe with its own unique palette. And you realize that when starlight passes through an atmosphere, something miraculous happens. The gases within leave behind signatures, delicate fingerprints written in rainbows, clues that reveal the unseen, and you sense that these colors of air are among the most powerful tools we have to understand worlds we cannot touch, worlds we may never visit, but can still know. You imagine yourself standing far away, telescope in hand, watching as a planet slips across the face of its star, and in that moment a sliver of starlight travels through its atmosphere, altered ever so slightly, some wavelengths absorbed, others scattered, and what emerges is not just dimmer light, but coded information, the atmospheric spectrum, a rainbow that tells us what gases swirl above those alien landscapes. You drift into the science gently, feeling how each element, each molecule interacts with light differently, hydrogen letting certain colors pass, methane absorbing others, oxygen leaving its distinct marks. And by reading these subtle patterns, astronomers can tell not only what a planet's atmosphere contains, but also how thick it is, how hot or cold, even whether clouds drift high above its surface. And you realize that this technique, so precise, so delicate, allows us to study planets light years away, turning distant orbs into readable worlds. You picture the rainbow stretched across the sky, and within it tiny gaps where colors are missing, each gap like a note missing from a melody. And you understand that those missing notes are the gases themselves, the molecules singing silently their presence, so that the atmosphere is not only a shield but also a song, carried across space to our waiting eyes. You breathe in this thought and remember how Earth's own atmosphere colors the sky, blue by day, crimson at sunset, indigo by night, all because of how gases scatter and filter sunlight. And you realize that other planets must have skies just as beautiful, though painted in unfamiliar shades. Perhaps a world with methane skies glows lavender, perhaps one with sodium haze burns orange, perhaps one with thick carbon dioxide reflects sunsets of endless crimson. And the thought soothes you, because it reminds you that beauty is universal, that every atmosphere paints with its own brush. You drift further in imagination, floating to Venus, where clouds of sulfuric acid scatter light into a bright, golden haze, a world where the sun is never seen directly, and then to Titan, where thick orange haze filters every view, and then to Mars, where thin air scatters light in such a way that sunsets are blue instead of red, and each example feels like a poem written in sky, a reminder that atmospheres speak in colors. If only you learn to listen. You return gently to the science, imagining astronomers splitting starlight with prisms, breaking it into spectra, comparing tiny differences, and you feel the patience of it, the dedication to reading whispers in light, for the signals are faint, hidden in noise, requiring years of effort to confirm. But each discovery is profound, a detection of water vapor here, a hint of methane there, a possible trace of carbon dioxide, and with each, the possibility of habitability grows stronger. You rest in this vision, knowing that the search for life is in truth a search for air and color, for skies that show imbalance, that reveal chemistry too lively to be explained by geology alone, chemistry that might require breath metabolism, life. You picture Earth as seen from afar, its spectrum revealing oxygen alongside methane, an impossible combination unless something is replenishing them. And you realize that to another civilization, Earth's colors will be the loudest, brightest signal. Here is life. Here is breath. Here is a planet alive. You exhale slowly, imagining how one day, as telescopes grow more powerful, we will find such signals elsewhere, rainbows carrying signs of distant biology, and the thought fills you with wonder, comfort, and peace, because it suggests we are not alone in painting the universe with color. You breathe once more and the vision expands, showing you how atmospheres also scatter light into patterns we can see even without spectra. The phases of planets brightening and dimming, the gleam of clouds reflecting starlight, the glows of auroras from magnetospheres, all colors in motion, all whispers of air. You see that studying these patterns is like watching the flicker of a candle in another room, subtle, delicate, yet revealing so much about the shape of the flame, the air that surrounds it, the life it sustains. And as your breath slows, you begin to wonder softly what other techniques might exist, what other ways we may listen to the whispers of atmospheres besides colors, perhaps by shadows or reflections or heat. And with that thought, you drift onward into the next chapter, where shadows across stars will tell their stories. You breathe slowly, and as your thoughts settle into the rhythm of the cosmos, you begin to picture the quiet geometry of a planet gliding across the face of its star, a small traveler casting a delicate shadow. And you realize that these shadows, though faint, reveal entire worlds, that as light dips and recovers, astronomers can read the presence of planets, their sizes, their orbits, and even the atmospheres they carry, and you rest in awe at how something so distant can be made visible by such subtle dimming. You imagine yourself as a star, radiant and steady, and one of your planets passes before you, blocking a sliver of light, a dark note in your song, and that eclipse, so brief, so slight, carries the power to reveal everything about the traveler's existence. You exhale gently and feel how the transit method, this quiet watching of shadows, has opened the universe, uncovering thousands of exoplanets, from giants that skim close to their stars to small rocky spheres not, unlike Earth. And with each one comes a possibility of skies, a breath of life. You drift deeper into this vision, and now you see how the shadow not only confirms a planet, but also reveals its atmosphere. Because as the starlight passes through that thin veil of gases, some wavelengths are absorbed, others pass, and the star's shadowed spectrum changes, carrying fingerprints of air. You realize that astronomers, with patience and precision, measure these tiny dips, compare them across colors, and from that decode the ingredients of alien skies, seeing water vapor, methane, sodium, or clouds high in hazy layers. You breathe again and feel wonder at the delicacy of it. The way a world invisible to the naked eye can whisper its secrets across light years, all because of shadows across stars. You imagine sitting with a telescope, watching the dimming, charting the curve of brightness as the planet moves, a soft valley carved in light. And you see that from the depth of that valley, you can tell the planet's size. From its duration, you can tell its orbit. And from repeated cycles, you know its rhythm, its year, its dance around the star. And suddenly, the unknown becomes known, the invisible made tangible. You rest in this awareness, feeling the beauty of how simple geometry and careful patience open entire universes of understanding. You drift further, imagining specific worlds. A hot Jupiter, enormous and close to its star, casting deep shadows frequently, its atmosphere boiling under fierce radiation. A super-Earth, heavier than our planet, its shadow more subtle, its orbit longer, making astronomers wait months or years to see its passage. And perhaps one day, a true Earth twin, its shadow tiny but meaningful, a world that could carry oceans and air like our own. You sense that these shadows are not empty darkness, but full of promise. Each dip in light a heartbeat of discovery. You exhale and think of how light curves also reveal more. When a planet slips behind a star, the secondary eclipse, its glow vanishes, and from the difference in brightness, astronomers measure the planet's temperature, its heat signature, its reflectivity, and even map the differences between day and night sides, so that shadows do not only mark presence, but also reveal climate, weather, even clouds. You rest in awe, realizing that with each shadow, each flicker, we learn not only that planets exist, but what they're like, how hot, how reflective, how stormy. You imagine how sensitive instruments must be, How much patience is required? For the dip of an Earth-sized planet is less than 1% of a star's light, and yet by watching thousands of stars, thousands of shadows have been found, each one a whisper of a world waiting to be understood. You drift in thought to the idea that shadows are universal, that every planet in the cosmos casts them, that every world, in some perspective, moves across its sun. And though we see only a fraction of these alignments, even that fraction has revealed a universe filled with planets, more worlds and stars, more possibilities and dreams. You exhale slowly and feel the poetry of it. That shadows, so often symbols of hiding, of loss, here become revelations, the very tool by which the hidden is found. You linger with this thought, sensing that the universe hides nothing forever, that patience and light uncover what seems invisible, and you carry that comfort within you. You imagine now the subtlety of starlight itself, how turbulence in Earth's own air, the noise of instruments, the vast distances blur the signals, and yet astronomers persist, refining methods, building new telescopes, launching observatories into space, all to catch the quietest shadows, the faintest whispers of transit, because within them lies a dream of finding a true Earth, a pale blue that's circling another sun. You rest in that dream, feeling its gentleness, its quiet urgency, knowing that one day the shadow of such a planet may carry not only fingerprints of air, but signs of life. You breathe slowly, and as the chapter draws to its close, you begin to wonder softly what happens when the planet does not simply block light, but reflects it, when the star's rays bounce off clouds and seas, when brightness itself becomes a messenger, and with that thought you drift onward into the next chapter, where mirrors in the dark will reveal their secrets. You breathe slowly, and after drifting through shadows across stars, you begin to notice that planets are not only revealed by blocking light, but also by reflecting it, by gleaming like tiny mirrors in the dark, scattering their stars' rays back into the cosmos. And this reflected glow, though faint, carries secrets of its own, secrets about atmospheres, about clouds, about oceans. And you realize that planets, in their way, are like wandering lanterns, shining not with their own fire, but with borrowed light. Each reflection a subtle signal, each shimmer a whisper what the surface and sky contain. You imagine yourself floating in the blackness of space, and before you a star glows bright, but around it, faint glimmers shift and brighten, planets swinging through their orbits, changing phase like moons, sometimes crescent, sometimes full, each phase altering the light we see. And you sense how astronomers measure these changes, how tiny differences in brightness reveal whether a world is covered in reflective clouds or dark oceans, whether its air is clear or hazy, whether it shines like glass or swallows light like coal. You rest in this thought, realizing that reflection, though subtle, is powerful, a way of reading not only presence but personality. You drift deeper into imagination and see Venus, brightest in Earth's sky, a mirror of thick clouds, brilliant but deceptive, shining with beauty while hiding a furnace beneath. And then you see Earth, shimmering blue and white, oceans and clouds gleaming like jewels, a planet whose reflections reveal water, life, and air. And you realize that to a distant observer, Earth would stand out not because it blocks light, but because it reflects it, because its mirror is alive with oceans and weather. You exhale gently and imagine hot Jupiters, massive worlds skimming close to their stars, their atmospheres reflecting fiercely at times, yet at others absorbing light with clouds of exotic composition, their brightness rising and falling in rhythm with their orbits. And from those rhythms astronomers can tell whether clouds dominate the day's side, whether storms swirl endlessly, whether heat is trapped or shed. You feel the poetry of this, that planets shine not by their own will, but by what they hold and what they hide, that their atmospheres act as both veils and mirrors, shaping the glimmers we see. You drift further, and now you picture the technique of phase curves, how astronomers watch a planet's brightness change as it circles its star, waxing and waning like a tiny alien moon. And from those curves they infer the distribution of clouds, the contrast between blazing hot days and freezing nights, the restless movement of air that shifts storms across hemispheres. And you marvel at the delicacy of it, how a faint shimmer across unimaginable distances can tell us about alien weather. You breathe again and think of oceans, how liquid water reflects in distinctive ways, how a glint of light, a speck of reflection, could one day betray the presence of seas on a distant world. And you realize how powerful that would be, to see not just gases or heat, but shining evidence of waves under alien skies. You rest in this vision, comforted by the idea that light itself carries memory, that photons bouncing from the surface travel across the void carrying the story of where they came from, arriving at our instruments as messengers of landscapes we cannot yet touch. You exhale and imagine how future telescopes will search for this glint, will look for oceans gleaming on rocky exoplanets, for reflections that prove not only atmospheres but surfaces alive with water, and perhaps clouds too, drifting in cycles, turning light into soft halos as they pass. You drift further, picturing exotic reflections, iron clouds gleaming on hot worlds, methane haze dimming others, sapphire skies refracting into deep blues, carbon-rich planets glimmering with tar-like surfaces, and each possibility feels like a brushstroke in a gallery of worlds, each reflection a painting hung in the cosmos. You sense that to study these mirrors is to study not only physics but poetry, to see how light becomes color, how reflection becomes story, how brightness becomes identity. You breathe slowly, feeling the rhythm of this thought, the calm patience of astronomers who measure faint gleams again and again, teasing out truth from noise, and you sense that within those flickers lies the possibility of finding Earth-like worlds, worlds whose reflections hint at balance, oceans and skies like our own. You linger with this comfort, then begin to wonder softly how light not only reflects but also radiates as heat, how planets glow with their own warmth and invisible wavelengths, how this too can tell us about climates and atmospheres, and with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where heat and hidden worlds will be revealed. You breathe gently, and as you drift deeper into the cosmic journey, you feel warmth spread across your awareness. Not the warmth of your own body, but the imagined warmth of distant planets, each carrying its own climate, its own invisible fire, and you realize that heat is one of the most profound storytellers of a world. For even when light fails to reflect, even when shadows tell little, the gentle glow of infrared carries secrets about atmospheres, surfaces, and hidden worlds that cannot otherwise be seen. You picture the universe not in visible light, but in longer waves, invisible to your eyes, yet glowing all around. And you sense how astronomers use infrared instruments to detect the faint warmth of planets, reading their temperatures, their seasons, their storms, and even the gases that shape their skies. And in this you begin to see heat not as absence of cold, but as presence of truth, the whisper of a planet's internal and external balance. You imagine Earth radiating, warmth out into space, balance between the fire of the sun and the cooling emptiness of the cosmos, its atmosphere holding just enough heat to keep oceans liquid, forests green, and life abundant. And you realize how fragile that balance is, how even small shifts in greenhouse gases can tilt the scale toward fever or frost, reminding you that habitability is a delicate interplay of warmth and release. You drift now to Venus, where heat is trapped in layers of carbon dioxide, building endlessly, a greenhouse runaway, a furnace that never cools, where the atmosphere itself becomes a wall of fire, and you contrast it with Mars, where thin air allows warmth to escape too quickly, leaving deserts frozen beneath a pale sun. And between these extremes you see Earth's precious middle path, a narrow band of balance, sustained by the careful holding and letting go of heat. You exhale and think of exoplanets, worlds circling other stars, many too far to reflect enough light for us to see directly, yet glowing faintly with their own infrared warmth. And by measuring this glow, astronomers glimpse atmospheres, even when reflections fail, learning whether air is thick or thin, whether heat is distributed evenly or trapped on one side, whether clouds swirl or surfaces lie bare. You imagine a tidally locked planet, one face scorched in endless day, the other frozen in eternal night, and how infrared light reveals the contrast, how heat maps show whether winds carry warmth from day to night, whether the atmosphere can breathe across extremes, and you marvel at the possibility of climates utterly alien, yet comprehensible through their thermal fingerprints. You drift further and picture giant planets, their interiors still hot from formation, radiating energy outward, glowing like embers beneath thick clouds, and how infrared light reveals their hidden structure, distinguishing gas giants from brown dwarfs, showing storms deeper than any seen on Earth, great belts of heat circulating in patterns more complex than wind alone. You feel the poetry of this, that heat is not only survival but history, that the warmth of a world tells its formation, its atmosphere, its inner life. You breathe again, and you imagine instruments like the James Webb Space Telescope, tuned to the infrared, peeling back cosmic veils to reveal faint glows, mapping temperatures across planets dozens of light years away, measuring not only if they are too hot or too cold, but whether they might lie in the gentle middle, the habitable zone where liquid water could persist, and thus where life might breathe. You rest in this awareness, comforted by the thought that heat, invisible to your eyes, is visible to our instruments, a universal messenger of habitability. You drift further, imagining worlds hidden by their stars' glare, impossible to see directly, yet detectable by their warmth as they circle, and you realize that heat is sometimes more honest than light, because while clouds and reflections can deceive, warmth cannot hide. It reveals whether a world is suffocated, frozen, or balanced. You think of Earth again, of how its climate is shifting under human hands, greenhouse gases rising, warmth increasing. You feel the poignancy of studying other worlds while tending carefully to your own, a reminder that the study of heat in the cosmos is also a mirror of responsibility at home. You exhale slowly, feeling how warmth is comfort but also warning, a dual truth carried across planets and stars. You linger with this thought, and then you begin to wonder softly how air and motion, not only its warmth but its winds and storms, shapes the life of atmospheres, how currents flow across alien skies, redistributing heat, sculpting climates, and carrying energy in patterns both strange and beautiful. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward toward the next chapter, where winds between the stars will carry you through restless alien skies. You breathe slowly, and from the warmth of hidden worlds you begin to imagine the restless movement of air, the invisible currents that flow across alien skies, carrying heat, carrying dust, carrying storms larger than continents, and you realize that atmospheres are not static blankets but living rivers, ceaselessly in motion, sculpting climates, shaping habitability, and writing stories of chaos and balance in every gust. You picture Earth first, your familiar guide, with jet streams racing. High above, carrying weather across oceans, with trade winds sweeping moisture from sea to land, with hurricanes spiraling their fierce power, and you recognize that your own world is alive with air and motion, a dance of sunlight rotation and uneven heating that never rests. Then you drift outward in thought, to tidally locked exoplanets, circling close to their stars, one face scorched in endless day, the other frozen in perpetual night, and you sense how winds there would be unimaginably strong, rushing ceaselessly from the blistering hot side toward the cold darkness, vast jet streams attempting to balance extremes, storms that never cease, hurricanes fixed in place yet roaring forever, and you feel how alien yet comprehensible these dynamics are. For the same physics of air applies everywhere, only magnified, stretched, reshaped by conditions far from Earth. You exhale gently and picture gas giants, Jupiter-like world with atmospheres so deep and thick that winds carve belts and zones, stripes that encircle entire planets, storms like the Great Red Spot persisting for centuries, and you realize that on hot Jupiters, blasted by their stars, winds may blow at thousands of kilometers per hour, carrying clouds of molten iron or silicate dust, storms fierce enough to move not only gases but minerals, skies glow with exotic weathers. You feel awe at the strangeness of it, a poetry of wind that turns air into rivers of metal, storms into furnaces, circulation into alien symphonies. You breathe again and think of Earth's own subtle winds, how they shape ecosystems, how monsoons bring rain, how breezes cool, and you realize that winds are not merely chaos but also lifelines, carriers of water, moderators of climate, redistributors of heat. And you see that on exoplanets too, winds are not only storms but sculptors of habitability, spreading warmth, softening extremes, creating balance that could allow oceans to stay liquid, life to endure. You imagine how astronomers, though so far away, measure these alien winds, not by feeling their touch, but by reading the slight shifts in light, the Doppler signatures of molecules carried by moving air, and you marvel at the precision, at how science can hear the rush of winds across a world light years away, like listening to a distant ocean to the faintest vibration. You drift further, and now you picture brown dwarfs, object between planet and star, their atmospheres turbulent with convection, winds rising and sinking in endless patterns, storm systems circling endlessly, their thermal light flickering as clouds pass and currents shift. And you realize that even without solid surfaces, atmospheres can carry landscapes of motion, vast, changing, alive. You breathe slowly, sensing the universality of winds, how they arise whenever there is contrast, whenever one side is hotter than another, whenever energy flows unevenly, and thus how inevitable they are on worlds with atmospheres, how certain it is that alien skies are alive with movement. You picture Titan again, where thick nitrogen winds carry organic hazes, shaping dunes across frozen plains, or Neptune, where the fastest winds in the solar system howl through blue skies, faster than sound, sculpting dark storms larger than Earth. And you feel how diverse, how powerful, how poetic the winds of worlds can be. You exhale gently and reflect that winds are also storytellers of time, carrying the history of a planet's climate, the rhythm of its seasons, the shifts of its energy. And you realize that to know a planet is to know its winds, to listen to the whispers and roars of air across its skies. You imagine standing on such a world, hearing not silence, but the deep breath of its atmosphere, endless, patient, restless. And you feel comforted by the thought that even faraway planets breathe in this way, that motion is everywhere, that nothing in the universe is still. You linger in this vision, then begin to wonder softly about the chemistry of these airs, not only their movement, but their ingredients, the molecules carried within them, the gases whose balances and imbalances might tell us if life itself stirs beneath. And with this quiet thought, you drift onward into the next chapter, where the breath of chemistry will reveal itself. You breathe slowly, and from the restless winds of alien skies, you begin to imagine what those currents carry, not just motion but molecules, not just heat but chemistry, each gas within an atmosphere character in the unfolding story of a planet. And you realize that atmospheres are not only blankets or mirrors or storms, but also mixtures, each one a recipe, a breath with meaning, because the balance of its ingredients can reveal history, surface processes, even the possibility of life. You drift first to Earth, your familiar anchor, and you sense how our own atmosphere is not random but shaped by biology, geology, and sunlight, nitrogen forming the background, oxygen sustained by photosynthesis, carbon dioxide shifting with oceans and forests, methane whispering of microbes and decay, water vapor cycling through clouds and rain. And you recognize how each molecule tells a story, how oxygen alone, so reactive, would vanish if not constantly replenished, how methane too, fragile in sunlight, endures only because something renews it, and in that renewal lies the fingerprint of life. You exhale gently and imagine Mars, where carbon dioxide dominates, thin and barren, hinting at cold deserts and frozen poles, its lack of balance telling a world once wetter but now silent. And then you turn to Venus, where carbon dioxide overwhelms, sulfuric acid clouds veil the sky, chemistry running toward extremes that trap heat and erase oceans. And you realize that both worlds show how chemistry can shift with time, how atmospheres evolve with their planets, sometimes toward habitability, sometimes away. You drift further and see giant planets, where hydrogen and helium form bulk, with methane, ammonia, and water in trace amounts painting clouds and colors, their chemistry driven by depth and pressure, storms mixing layers like cosmic laboratories, lightning sparking reactions that may even form complex molecules. And you feel awe at the creativity of skies, at the way chemistry becomes sculpture, painting belts, spots, and hazes across worlds. You breathe again and imagine exoplanets, their spectra revealing sodium lines, water vapor signatures, methane bands, each discovery like catching a whisper in the dark, a breath across the void. And you realize how delicate these detections are, how hard won, how each one reveals not only molecules but balance, ratios, and disequilibria, the subtle signs of something dynamic. You linger on the idea of disequilibrium, that true signs of life may not be single molecules but imbalances, oxygen paired with methane, carbon dioxide alongside water vapor, signals that do not sit still but suggest renewal, metabolism, cycles that geology alone struggles to explain. And you feel wonder at this, that life may reveal itself not through shouting but through balance, through quiet chemistry that cannot sustain itself without the breath of biology. You drift now to Titan, Saturn's moon, its thick nitrogen atmosphere rich with methane, hazes of organic molecules forming in sunlight, raining hydrocarbons onto frozen plains. And you marvel at the alienness of it, yet also at its familiarity. For chemistry there is complex, layered, prebiotic perhaps, a reminder that atmospheres can carry seeds of life's ingredients even in unlikely places. You exhale gently and sense how chemistry links worlds together, how the same elements repeat, yet combine differently under different conditions, creating diversity from simplicity, reminding you that the universe works with the same palette everywhere, yet paints endlessly new canvases. You breathe and think of the tools we use to study these breaths. Spectrographs splitting light into rainbows, telescopes capturing faint signals, models comparing possible mixtures. And you feel the patience of this work, the delicacy of decoding alien air molecule by molecule, like reading poetry written in another tongue. You rest in this awareness, comforted by the thought that each discovery adds to a larger picture, that each new molecule detected brings us closer to understanding not only atmospheres but the condition for life. You linger now on the philosophical thought that chemistry itself is breath, that molecules move and mingle, combining and separating, creating the cycles that sustain planets. And you realize that to breathe is to participate in chemistry, that every inhale and exhale connects you to the larger dance. And so too must alien life, if it exists, breathe its own version of chemistry, leaving signals for us to find. You exhale slowly, and as the chapter draws to its close, you begin to wonder softly about the shapes those signals might take. Not only gases but clouds, hazes, veils drifting in alien skies, layers that both reveal and conceal. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where clouds of possibility await. You breathe slowly, and from the breath of chemistry, you begin to see not only gases but shapes, not only invisible molecules but visible veils, clouds drifting in alien skies, forming, dissolving, painting atmospheres with mystery and beauty. And you realize that clouds are more than decoration, more than weather. They are mirrors, shields, storytellers of climate and chemistry, sculptors of how a planet breathes and how it appears to the universe. And you picture first your own world, Earth, where clouds scatter sunlight, cool surfaces carry rain, shape rhythms of climate, reflecting light back into space or trapping heat below, balancing energy with every formation and dissipation. And you sense how familiar they are, yet how powerful, how fragile wisps can change the course of temperature and weather across continents. You drift now to Venus, where clouds dominate everything, thick, unbroken, reflecting sunlight so fiercely that the planet shines like a jewel in the sky. Yet beneath lies a furnace, a world hidden and suffocated. And you realize that clouds can both reveal and conceal, beautiful from afar but masking a harsh reality. You exhale and imagine Jupiter, its belts and zones painted by clouds of ammonia and other chemicals, storms swirling endlessly, the great red spot, a vast world cloud lasting centuries. And you feel how clouds are not fleeting but monumental, not passing but enduring, sculpted by deep circulation, making a planet's face recognizable across centuries. You drift further to Saturn, with its pale golden cloud, to Uranus and Neptune with their methane skies and streaks of white storms, and you marvel at the diversity. Each world a canvas of clouds painted with different ingredients, different temperatures, different winds. You breathe again and picture Titan, Saturn's largest moon, with methane clouds raining hydrocarbons onto frozen plains, alien weather carrying organic chemistry, in cycles familiar yet strange. And you sense how even in the coldest corners of the solar system, clouds are possibility, carriers of molecules, makers of landscapes. You rest in this vision and now imagine exoplanets, hot Jupiters so close to their stars that their skies may hold clouds of silicate, droplets of molten glass condensing and raining into deep atmospheres, or iron clouds forming under extreme heat, raining metal across alien skies. And you feel awe at the strangeness of it. Clouds not water but stone and metal, whether exotic yet natural under those conditions. You exhale gently and think of hazes, the tiny particles high in atmospheres that scatter light, turning skies orange, muting spectra, hiding signals of molecules below. And you realize how challenging they are for astronomers, how a hazy sky can conceal gases of interest, yet how hazes themselves are clues, signs of chemistry at work, of ultraviolet light sparking reactions, of molecules breaking and forming. You drift further and recall how astronomers detect these clouds not by seeing them directly, but by their effects on light, the flattening of spectra, the dimming of absorption lines, the way signals seem muted. And you realize that even absence of clear signals is itself information, telling of veils, of particles, of atmospheres rich in complexity. You breathe and imagine future instruments peeling back these veils, seeing deeper into cloudy atmospheres, separating haze from gas, teasing apart signals, revealing what lies beneath. and you sense how much more there's to learn, how clouds are both barriers and bridges, obstacles of clarity, but also invitations to wonder. You linger in the thought that clouds are possibility of water cycles, of climates balanced, of chemistry complex, even of life beneath. For on Earth, clouds not only cool but carry rain, sustain forests, feed rivers, nurture fields, and you wonder softly whether on other worlds too, clouds might play such roles, sustaining, shaping, nourishing. You exhale slowly, letting the image expand. Clouds of sapphire refracting starlight, clouds of carbon scattering darkness, clouds of diamond glinting under exotic pressures. And you realize that the universe is not bound by Earth's examples, that possibility is endless, that every world carries its own imagination in sky. You rest in this awareness, comforted by the thought that clouds are not only weather but poetry, not only physics but mystery, each one a veil and a promise. And as your breath steadies, you begin to wonder softly about the faintest signals, about atmospheres so subtle, so thin, that their whispers are almost drowned by distance and noise, yet still reachable, still carrying truths. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where the faintest whispers will speak. You breathe slowly, and as the clouds of possibility drift away in your mind's sky, you become aware of something subtler, quieter, more delicate. The whispers of distant atmospheres that reach us across light years, faint, fragile signals almost drown in the vast silence of space. Yet within them lies the truth of alien skies, and you realize that the art of astronomy is often the art of listening to whispers, of coaxing meaning from near silence, of finding pattern in faintness. You picture photons leaving a star, passing through a thin veil of planetary air, carried with them tiny signatures of molecules, and then journeying for years, centuries, or millennia before reaching the mirror of a telescope. And you feel awe at the improbability of it, that such fragile messengers can survive the void, carrying secrets in their wavelengths, ready to be read by human eyes and instruments. You imagine astronomers at their work, parsing spectra so faint they appear as noise, stacking thousands of transits, comparing light curves, straining for signals weaker than a whisper in a storm. And you feel the patience of it, the dedication required to extract meaning from such delicate clues. And you sense that this patience itself is part of the poetry of science, a trust that even faint whispers can tell profound stories. You exhale gently and recall that some of the most important discoveries have come from such faintness. The first hints of water vapor in exoplanet atmospheres, the suggestion of sodium or potassium lines, the soft flattening of spectra that betrays haze, each one a quiet affirmation that distant skies are real, complex, and knowable. You drift further and imagine the challenges. The blurring from Earth's own air when ground telescopes listen, the need to filter out noise from instruments, the competition between star spots and planetary signals. And yet through persistence, the whispers emerge, like stars revealed when clouds part. You breathe again and think of the James Webb Space Telescope, floating beyond Earth's air, tuned to the faintest infrared whispers, already revealing atmospheres with clarity never seen before, showing molecules, clouds, and heat distributions. And you realize that what was once hidden in faintness is becoming visible, that the whispers are growing louder with our technology, and yet still, the faintest signals will always require careful listening, gentle patience. You picture yourself listening not with ears but with imagination, hearing the faint rustle of molecules in alien air, the quiet hum of gases in balance or imbalance, and you realize that each whisper carries possibility, that even the faintest suggestion of oxygen or methane or water vapor can ignite the hope of life, the dream of connection across space. You exhale slowly and think of Earth again, of how, seen from light years away, our own biosignatures will be faint whispers too, oxygen lines delicate, methane hints fragile, balance visible only with effort. And you feel humility in this, a reminder that our own life signal is not a shout but a gentle murmur, one that requires attentive listening to be found. You rest in this thought and let your awareness drift further, imagining the future, when arrays of telescopes spread across space, linking their vision, listening together, amplifying whispers into songs, revealing Earth-like planets with clarity, turning the faintest murmur into undeniable truth. You sense the unfolding of this path, and it soothes you, for it suggests that silence is never truly empty, that patience always reveals, that whispers can become revelation. You linger with this comfort, Then begin to wonder softly what those whispers might say when they reveal not just chemistry, but patterns of life. What it will mean to detect gases that do not belong without biology. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where life's invisible signature will begin to appear. You breathe slowly, and as the faintest whispers of alien skies linger in your mind, you begin to imagine what it would mean if those whispers carried something more, something not explained by geology or chemistry alone, something alive. And you realize that the search for exoplanet atmospheres is not only the search for molecules, but the search for balance, for disequilibrium, for the invisible signatures of life itself. You drift gently into the idea that gases, though silent, are storytellers. And when their stories do not add up, when their presence cannot be explained by volcanoes, lightning, or photochemistry, then perhaps life is the author, writing in air with every breath, every metabolic spark, and you sense the poetry of it. That life leaves a fingerprint not carved in stone or written in light, but breathed into sky, persistent yet delicate, visible only to those who know how to look. You imagine Earth as seen from afar, and you see that its spectrum reveals oxygen, abundant and reactive, a gas that should vanish quickly if not renewed, and alongside it methane, fragile under sunlight, yet still present. And you recognize that this coexistence is impossible without biology, without photosynthesis filling the sky with oxygen, without microbes and animals replenishing methane. And you understand that these two together form a signature, an invisible proof that life stirs. Below, you exhale gently and imagine astronomers finding such a pair on a distant world, their instruments detecting the imbalance, and you feel the quiet wonder of it, the realization that even without hearing voices or seeing shapes, we would know we are not alone, because the air itself would carry the message. Life written as chemistry. You drift further and consider other signatures, subtler ones, nitrous oxide, produced by microbes or dimethyl sulfide, carried by plankton, or even patterns of carbon dioxide and methane that shift with seasons, all whispers of biology written in air, and you realize that no single gas is proof, but combinations, balances, cycles. These are the signs of metabolism, of renewal, of the invisible yet undeniable persistence of life. You breathe again and think of false signals, how volcanoes can produce methane, how chemical reactions can mimic oxygen, how illusions can arise. And you realize that detecting life requires not just molecules but context, understanding how gases interact, how atmospheres evolve, how stars influence chemistry. And you sense the patience of science, the humility required to distinguish true signatures from false dawns. You exhale and reflect on the fragility of such signals, how faint they are, how easily they blend with noise, how long it may take to confirm them. And yet you also feel the inevitability, the certainty that with enough listening, enough patience, enough care, the invisible will become visible, the faint will become clear, the sky will reveal its truth. You rest in this awareness and drift into the thought that life's signature is not only in air but also in time, that atmospheres change with seasons, with cycles, with rhythms, and that by watching long enough, astronomers might see patterns, gases rising and falling as ecosystems breathe, as planets turn. And you sense the beauty of this idea, that life might reveal itself not in a single moment but in a rhythm, a planetary heartbeat, written in chemistry. You linger with Earth again, imagining its seasonal breath. Carbon dioxide rising in winter as plants rest, falling in summer as they bloom, oxygen shifting in tandem. And you realize that even this could be seen from afar, the rhythm of forests and fields visible in air, and you marvel at the thought that alien observers might already see it, might already know that Earth is alive. You exhale slowly and feel humility, knowing that our planet speaks constantly through its air, that we are ourselves a biosignature, participants in the writing of this invisible message, and you sense how profound it is to think that life itself is always broadcasting, not through technology or signals we invent, but through the quiet chemistry of breath. You breathe once more and imagine the moment when astronomers finally detect such a signal on another world, when oxygen and methane or some other improbable pair are confirmed, and you feel the calm wonder of that discovery, not a shout, but a gentle revelation, a connection across space, the knowledge that life is not unique, that the cosmos is not silent, that breath is shared. You rest in this vision, comforted by the thought that life, in its humility, always leaves traces, that even when invisible to the eye, it is always present in the balance of air, in the signatures it cannot help but write. And as your breath steadies, you begin to wonder softly about the illusions that might deceive us, the false dawns that mimic life, and how careful discernment is needed. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where false dawns and true signs will be explored. You breathe slowly, and as life's invisible signature lingers in your mind, you begin to reflect on how fragile such hope can be, how the cosmos, though generous, is also deceptive, and you realize that in the search for alien life, not every signal of chemistry is a proof of biology. For some are false dawns, illusions painted by the natural processes of planets and stars, echoes of life where none exists, and yet within these illusions lies the discipline of science, the patience to separate mirage from truth, and you sense that this careful discernment is as important as the search itself. You imagine yourself looking through a telescope, seeing a spectrum with oxygen, feeling the surge of wonder, and then learning that volcanic reactions or breaking of water molecules by sunlight can create oxygen too, without a single leaf or lung, and you recognize the humility required to ask again, to question, to test, rather than to assume, for the universe is subtle, and it does not yield its secrets easily. You exhale gently and picture methane, so often a hopeful sign, yet also produced by volcanic activity, by chemical reactions in hot crusts, by processes that mimic the whispers of microbes, and you realize that the challenge is not in finding gases, but in interpreting them, in reading them in context, in understanding whether they are sustained or fleeting, balanced or isolated, for life is rarely a single note, but rather a harmony, and only in harmony can its presence be trusted. You drift further and think of carbon dioxide, water vapor, and other common molecules, all part of atmospheres, all natural, yet their ratios, their combinations, their imbalances are what matter, for equilibrium without renewal is silence, but imbalance is a breath, and you feel how delicate the distinction is, how faint the line between geology and biology. You rest in this awareness and imagine the work of astronomers, comparing models, testing atmospheres against scenarios, asking whether a given mix could arise without life, and often discovering that yes, it could, that illusions are common, that many signals that look alive are in fact geologic. And you recognize that this discipline, though it slows discovery, strengthens truth, making the final confirmation of life, when it comes, unshakable. You exhale and reflect on Earth, how if seen at different times in its history, it too might have misled, appearing lifeless when oxygen was absent, or appearing biologically rich when oxygen came not from life, but from early chemical processes. And you realize that planets evolve, that signatures shift, that what seems false at one time may become true later, and what seems true may be only a temporary illusion. You drift further, picturing exoplanets under harsh stars, where radiation splits molecules, creating gases that mimic biology, or planets with runaway greenhouses producing oxygen from water loss, or volcanic worlds belching methane in quantities that overwhelm. And you sense how carefully one must read these atmospheres, how patience must temper excitement, how truth requires context. You breathe slowly and find comfort in the idea that even false dawns are valuable, for they teach us how planets work, how atmospheres evolve, how geology sings its own songs, and each lesson brings us closer to distinguishing life's melody from the background noise of chemistry. You linger now on the thought of true signs, of signals that cannot be mimicked, of patterns so complex they demand biology, and you realize that these may not be single gases but symphonies, oxygen alongside methane, seasonal cycles repeating predictably, combinations of molecules that persist in disequilibrium, impossible to maintain without metabolism, without breath, without life itself. And you feel wonder at this, that life's proof may lie not in isolation, but in interconnection, in the complexity of a system that cannot arise otherwise. You exhale and imagine the day when such a true sign is found, when models and tests and doubts all fall away, and the signal stands undeniable, and you sense the quiet revolution it will bring, not in shouting, but in a calm shift of understanding, a widening of the circle of life to include the stars. You breathe deeply and recognize that the search for life is also the practice of humility, the willingness to be deceived, to correct, to refine, to wait, for only then can discovery endure, and you feel peace in that patience, knowing that false dawns are not failures but steps toward truth. You linger in this comfort, then begin to wonder softly what other worlds might teach us, not only through illusions but through extremes, through atmospheres of fire and ice that test the limits of habitability. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where the diversity of worlds will unfold. You breathe slowly, and from a careful discernment of false dawns and true signs, you drift now into the extremes, the places where atmospheres are shaped not by balance but by intensity, by fire and by ice, by searing heat that strips molecules in the sky, and by deep cold that freezes gases into stillness. And you realize that to know habitability, you must first know its boundaries, its limits, its edges where life may falter or perhaps adapt in ways you cannot yet imagine. You picture, first of fiery worlds, hot Jupiters skimming their stars, their day sides heated to thousands of degrees, their molecules ripped apart and reassembled, their winds howling at supersonic speeds, clouds forming from metals and silicates, raining droplets of molten iron back into glowing skies. And you sense the wildness of it, an atmosphere in constant flux, sculpted by fire, beautiful yet brutal, alive with chemistry too extreme for comfort. And yet, even here there is story for such extremes. Teach us what atmospheres can endure, how physics shapes balance under duress. You exhale gently and drift a rocky world scorched by close orbits, their surfaces molten, their atmospheres perhaps thin veils of vaporized rock, sodium and calcium glowing in spectra, a reminder that not all planets are havens, but some are crucibles, places of fire where atmospheres are fleeting, burned away by relentless radiation, leaving only bare stone to orbit in silence. You breathe again and turn now toward the other edge, the frozen worlds, where atmospheres condense and collapse, where carbon dioxide snows onto Martian poles, where nitrogen frosts glaze the surfaces of Pluto and Triton, where Titan's methane cycles play out in slow cold, rivers of liquid hydrocarbons carving valleys under orange skies. And you feel how ice too is an author of atmospheres, not by motion but by stillness, not by heat but by restraint, locking molecules into frozen reservoirs, releasing them in cycles as seasons shift, whispering possibility even in silence. You drift further and imagine rogue planets, wandering without stars, their skies frozen, their atmospheres perhaps held by gravity yet dim and still, or perhaps warmed faintly by inner heat, sustaining pockets of exotic weather beneath blankets of ice. And you realize that even in coldest exile, atmospheres may linger, fragile but enduring, a reminder of resilience. You exhale slowly and consider the balance between fire and ice, the habitable zone where planets may sustain liquid water, neither scorched nor frozen. And you sense how precious this balance is, how narrow, how easily lost, and how remarkable it is that Earth rests within it, cradled between extremes, when atmosphere shaped not by fire alone nor by ice alone, but by cycles of moderation. You breathe and reflect that studying extremes expands your vision, shows you the boundaries of possibility, reveals the diversity of skies the universe paints. And you realize that atmospheres are not limited to Earth-like gentleness, but span a spectrum from blazing furnaces to frozen stillness, each with lessons to teach. You linger on the thought of life, wondering whether extremophiles on Earth, microbes in boiling vents, bacteria beneath glaciers, hint that life too may stretch into these realms, adapting to fire and ice in ways we cannot yet predict. And you feel a quiet openness to the possibility that even in atmospheres we deem hostile, something may endure, may thrive, may write its own signature in alien skies. You exhale once more, comforted by the idea that the cosmos is vast enough for all possibilities, for worlds of fire, for world of ice, and for the narrow middle path where oceans breathe. And as your awareness steadies, you begin to wonder softly how the stars themselves, not only planets, shape these extremes, how their light, their heat, their flares sculpt atmospheres. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where the temperate stars will be revealed. You breathe slowly, and as a vision of worlds of fire and ice drifts through your thoughts, you begin to realize that planets do not live in isolation, that their atmospheres, their climates, their very chances of habitability are sculpted not only by themselves, but by the tempers of the stars they orbit. And you imagine each star as a parent, shaping the destiny of its worlds, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, sometimes steady, sometimes volatile. And you sense how deeply atmospheres depend on these stellar moods. You picture first the sun, your familiar guide, stable for billions of years, providing warmth enough for liquid oceans, energy enough for photosynthesis, yet not without its tempers, flares and storms, bursts of radiation that ripple through Earth's atmosphere, lighting skies with auroras and sometimes disrupting technology, but still mild compared to many stars. And you realize how rare and precious the steadiness is, for so many stars are less patient, less gentle. You drift now to red dwarfs, the smallest stars, cool in light, long in life, yet flaring with violent bursts, their temper unpredictable, their radiation fierce. And you imagine a planet circling close to such a star, bathed in warmth but battered by flares, its atmosphere stripped, replenished, reshaped in cycles of chaos. And you sense how difficult habitability becomes, how life there would have to endure storms more intense than anything Earth has known. Also how possible it is, for red dwarfs are abundant, their planets numerous, and their long lifespans generous in time for life to emerge. You exhale gently and picture massive stars, brilliant and short-lived, their radiation fierce, their wind stripping atmospheres before life has time to take root. And you recognize how inhospitable such brilliance is, how fleeting, how beautiful but barren, like fireworks in the night sky, dazzling but gone too soon. You breathe again and think of stars that pulse, that dim and brighten, that send varying energy across their planets. And you realize that atmospheres under such tempers would expand and contract, heat and cool, weather cycling in extremes, a dance of instability that challenges any calm. You drift further and picture binary stars, pairs circling one another, their planets bathed in two suns, sometimes warmed too much, sometimes cooled, sometimes pulled in complex orbits, and you marvel at the strangeness of it, the poetry of skies with twin dawns and twin sunsets, and you wonder what atmospheres would be like there, what climates would arise under such shifting temper. You exhale slowly and feel the connection between stars and worlds, how ultraviolet light breaks molecules, how stellar winds strip gases into space, how radiation seeds chemistry, sparking reactions that may create life's building blocks or destroy them. And you realize that the temper of stars is both gift and threat, both nurturer and destroyer. You rest in this awareness, feeling humility in the face of such power, knowing that habitability is not only about distance or chemistry, but about stellar stability, about the calm or chaos of the parent star. You linger now on Earth again, grateful for the sun's patience, for its quiet balance, for its rare gift of constancy, and you imagine how fragile this gift is in the wider cosmos, how most worlds orbit stars less steady, less kind. You exhale gently and begin to wonder softly how atmospheres themselves defend against stellar temper, how magnetic fields shield them, how molecules absorb radiation, how layers of air become guardians. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where shields of air and magnetism will reveal their protection. You breathe slowly, and as you recall the temper of stars, you realize that planets cannot merely receive their light and warmth passively. They must also defend themselves. They must endure, they must shield. And you begin to sense that atmospheres and magnetic fields are not only blankets for warmth or canvases for chemistry, but guardians, invisible shields that preserve oceans, protect surfaces, and keep life safe beneath their watch. And you picture Earth as your guide, its magnetic field, stretching outward like unseen arms, deflecting charged particles hurled from the sun, creating curtains of auroras at the poles, but sparing the air and ground from deadly radiation. And you realize how crucial this unseen shield is, how fragile life would be without it, how quickly water and air would vanish under the constant assault of stellar winds. You drift deeper into this awareness and imagine Mars, once alive with rivers and lakes, but lacking a strong magnetic field, its atmosphere, slowly stripped away by solar particles, its shield too weak, its air too thin, leaving a cold, dry desert behind. And you feel the poignancy of the story, a world that lost its guard, and with its habitability, a reminder that the shield is as important as the air it protects. You exhale gently and now turn to Venus, where a thick atmosphere still persists, yet without a strong magnetic field. It relies on its sheer density. Its upper layers ionize into a weak induced magnetosphere, and you sense how even there, shielding is fragile, imperfect, yet enduring its own way, showing that worlds find different paths to defense. You breathe again and picture giant planets, Jupiter and Saturn, with magnetic fields so strong they carve vast magnetospheres, trapping particles, creating radiation belts fierce and immense. and you realize that their moons are protected in complex ways, sometimes sheltered, sometimes exposed. Their shields, both guardians and sources of danger, and you marvel at the interplay of these invisible forces across space. You drift further and imagine exoplanets close to red dwarfs, bombarded by flares, their survival depending not only on distance but on magnetic strength, on atmospheres thick enough to absorb radiation, on shields capable of withstanding tempests, and you sense how delicate, how precarious, how unlikely it can be for habitability to endure under such constant assault, and yet how possible, how resilience may emerge in ways we cannot yet imagine. You exhale and reflect that shielding is not only magnetic but atmospheric, that layers of air absorb ultraviolet light, that ozone forms on Earth to guard against harmful rays, that molecules themselves can act as guardians, balancing protection with chemistry, and you feel gratitude for the atmosphere above you, invisible yet constant, filtering, absorbing, sheltering. You breathe and think of the dual beauty of auroras, how the very interaction between solar particles and shields paints the sky with light. Reminder that defense can also be art, that protection can also be beauty, and you imagine alien auroras glowing in colors beyond imagination, shimmering on exoplanets with fields strong or weak, painting skies with the artistry of cosmic struggle. You drift further and realize that shielding is not permanent, that fields weaken, atmospheres evolve, stars change their temper, and habitability depends on endurance, on shields strong enough to last billions of years, long enough for life to take root, to thrive, to leave its own mark on air, and you sense the fragility of this balance, the rarity of worlds that achieve it, the preciousness of planets like Earth. You exhale softly and linger in the thought that shielding is itself part of life's story, for without it, life may never begun here, or if it had, it may not have endured. And so every breath you take is also a gift of the shield. Every inhale and exhale a reminder of the magnetic and atmospheric guardians working silently above you. You rest in this awareness, then begin to wonder softly what happens when shielding fails, when atmospheres are lost, when worlds are stripped bare, and whether life can endure beneath surfaces, in oceans or underground. And with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the next chapter, where the silence of barren worlds will speak. You breathe slowly, and as the thought of shields drift away, you begin to imagine places where no such protection remains. The planets and moons left bare, their atmospheres lost, their skies silent, their surfaces exposed to the endless void. And you realize that these barren worlds tell stories profound as the lush ones. From their silence lies memory, a record of what can be gained and what can be lost. You picture first a moon, close and familiar. Its silence so absolute you can almost feel in your chest. No air to carry sound, no wind to shape the ground, only rock and dust unchanged for eons, except where meteorites strike and leave scars. And you sense how emptiness itself is a kind of atmosphere, not in presence but in absence, teaching you what worlds without air become. You drift now to Mercury, closest to the sun, where heat by day strips away what little air could cling, where solar winds sweep particles into space, leaving only a thin exosphere, a ghost of an atmosphere, more memory than substance. And you realize that barren does not always mean untouched, but rather eroded, worn down until nothing remains but rock under relentless light. You exhale gently and picture Mars, once rich with rivers and lakes, now a desert beneath thin air, its silence poignant because it is not original but earned, its atmosphere once strong, its shield once present but now lost, stripped by solar winds after its magnetic field faded. And you feel the sorrow of a world that once whispered with water, now hushed by thin silence, a lesson in fragility. You breathe again and drift to Pluto, small and cold, with an atmosphere that rises when it is near the sun and collapses back onto the surface as frost when it drifts away, a cycle of presence and absence, a fragile rhythm of breathing and silence. And you sense the poetry of this, that even barren worlds can inhale and exhale, though faintly, though briefly, as though life itself echoes in their stillness. You drift further and imagine exoplanets stripped bare by their stars, hot worlds too close, their atmospheres blown away, leaving molten rock and exposed surfaces, or rogue planets wandering in darkness, their air frozen and fallen, leaving only silence and cold exile. And you realize that barren worlds are abundant, perhaps the majority, silent witnesses to the violence and fragility of the cosmos. You exhale softly and reflect on Earth again, how it too might one day join them, its air lost in far future epochs, its shield weakened, its oceans boiled or frozen, and you feel both humility and gratitude that you live now, while the shield still holds, while the silence is still kept at bay. You breathe deeply and sense that barren worlds are not failures, but teachers, reminding you that habitability is rare, fragile, precious, that atmospheres are treasures not guaranteed, and that silence itself is a kind of message, a warning written in rock and dust. You linger in this awareness, then begin to wonder softly what might endure even beneath silence, what stories might still be told underground, beneath ice, in hidden oceans shielded from above, and with that gentle curiosity, you drift onward into the final chapter, where echoes of life will rise from silence. You breathe slowly, and as the silence of barren worlds lingers in your thoughts, you begin to imagine the faintest possibility that silence is not always absence, that beneath rock, beneath ice, beneath the stillness of planets stripped bare, there may remain echoes, quiet traces of what once was, or what still lingers unseen. And you realize that the search for exoplanet atmospheres is not only about gases and shields, but about listening for these echoes, for the subtle fingerprints of life, in unlikely places. You picture Mars again, not only its dry deserts, but the possibility of briny water deep underground, places shielded from radiation where microbes might persist, not in lush forests, but in hidden caverns, and you feel the poignancy of life surviving in whispers rather than in songs, holding on in places where silence rules above. You drift now to Europa, its icy crust covering a vast subsurface ocean, no thick atmosphere protected. Yet beneath the ice, liquid water warmed by tidal forces, an entire hidden sea where chemistry stirs in darkness. And you sense that this too is an echo of life, a reminder that atmospheres are not the only guardians, that worlds without air may still cradle oceans, and oceans may still cradle life. You exhale gently and turn to Enceladus, where plumes of water erupt from icy cracks, carrying organic salts, perhaps whispers of microbial breath, shooting into space from an ocean seal beneath. And you realize that atmospheres need not be global to matter, that even localized breaths, plumes escaping into the cosmos, can be enough to reveal the possibility of life. You breathe again and picture Titan, where thick nitrogen air shelters methane rivers and lakes, a chemistry alien to you but familiar in its cycles, a world where life may not echo Earth but may whisper in new forms, built from other molecules, breathing other airs, yet alive in its own right. And you sense the vastness of possibility, the humility of knowing that life may not look like you, may not breathe like you, yet may still exist, still echo through atmospheres, still reveal itself in balance and disequilibrium. You drift further to distant exoplanets, rocky world inhabitable zones, their atmospheres faintly showing water vapor, oxygen, methane, signals subtle but persistent, whispers carried across light years. And you realize that when we detect these, we are hearing echoes of life itself, not voices, not shapes, but the steady breath of chemistry written in skies, the echo of metabolism across space. You exhale and think of Earth again, of how it too is an echo, its oxygen not a natural inevitability, but the product of billions of years of photosynthesis, its methane not geology alone, but biology's work. And you feel awe how life has transformed this planet into a beacon, how air itself is testimony, how every breath you take is part of the echo, sustained by forests, oceans, microbes, all writing together in chemistry. You breathe deeply and sense that echoes are more lasting than shouts, that life does not need to scream its presence, that even when faint, even when almost lost in silence, its signature persists, and you feel comfort in knowing that if life exists elsewhere, it too will leave its echo, carried in atmospheres, in oceans, in chemistry that cannot hide. You rest in this thought and imagine the future, when instruments will grow sharper, when arrays of telescopes will link across space, when planets will be studied not only as shadows but as worlds, their skies mapped, their climates understood, their signatures parsed with patience until echoes become songs. And you sense that humanity stands at the edge of this listening, just beginning to hear, just beginning to understand. You linger now on the philosophical truth that searching for echoes of life is also searching for kinship, for connection, for a reminder that Earth is not alone in breathing, not singular in being alive, and that to find such echoes is to widen your sense of home, to expand your circle of belonging to include not only your planet but the cosmos itself. You exhale slowly, letting this comfort settle into you, feeling the calm reassurance that even if silence dominates, The possibility of echoes endures, that somewhere, some world may already be whispering its presence through air, through light, through balance, waiting patiently for us to hear. You drift gently into this closing vision, imagining the cosmos not as empty but as filled with breaths, some loud, some faint, some hidden, some revealed, all part of a larger symphony. And you realize that your journey through exoplanet atmospheres has been more than science. It has been a meditation on fragility, resilience, silence, and song. And as your awareness softens, you let yourself rest in the final thought that life, wherever it exists, is never silent. It always leaves an echo, and one day, across the stillness of space, we will hear it.